Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar on managing your capacity for success with our very special guest who is an alum. I know we shared that many of us are alum here, so it's so great that we have one of our very own Roosevelt alumni joining us, Nicole Rhone, to talk about how to manage your capacity for success. Before I turn it over to Nicole and have her begin, I do want to share a little bit about her and introduce Nicole. She is a capacity coach and helps women create balance between their personal lives and professional lives while prioritizing self-care. I know we have some men in the room, so all of this I think applies to you too, but I'll let Nicole cover more about that. And Nicole is a wife and she is a mom of two, and she really steadily and successfully climbed the corporate ladder. She supported billion-dollar organizations for over a decade. And at that time, she was a human resources leader, and she coached and trained managerial staff, which included C-suite and executive level employees. And she helped them to build their leadership capabilities, encourage them on how to increase productivity and cultivate a company that thrived. And because of her corporate experience, Nicole really has a good understanding on the unique challenges of busy, high-performing women and how lack of fluidity between the world of home and work can create a barrier between them and their next level. The art of flow is a force that she teaches, and I think she's going to touch on that here today, which is all about really helping women and her clients find a rhythm between their personal and professional lives. Nicole also has an amazing podcast called Flow and Flourish, where she talks about how to create flow in each area of her art of flow without ever having to sacrifice yourself, your family, and what matters most about you. So such important topics that she's gonna talk to us about today and teach us all. I'm very excited. I feel like this is something that a lot of us probably need right now in our lives. So Nicole, thank you so much for being here. We're very excited for you to share with us and teach us a little bit more. I'll turn it over.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here. As you mentioned, I am an alum. I graduated in 2012, right when that building behind me was being built. So it's nice to see it fully completed and in the background, and even driving through Chicago. Just want to say happy Thursday or Friday Eve to everyone. That's what I like to call it, because, you know, Wednesday is kind of hump day. Thursday, we're almost there. So happy Friday Eve. I am so excited to really be hosting this capacity webinar today, especially in partnership with Roosevelt. And the reason being is that when I applied to Roosevelt in 2010, it was actually my second choice school. I was living on the north side of Chicago, and because I grew up in Rogers Park, I really had my heart set on going to Loyola. And I'd even got accepted into that university. However, at the time, the way that my capacity was set up, I couldn't take what was the traditional route in terms of the schedule of classes during the day, because I was working full time and as a single mom, and I really needed the flexibility to take classes in the evening and online. So as an alumni, I want to know how many of you chose RU because of the same need for flexibility or accommodation to what I consider the real world schedules. Let me see, like by a show of hands, anybody? Okay. Okay, good. So I'm not alone. That's good. Definitely one of the, like I said, main reasons that I decided to go with Roosevelt. And I said all of that because I believe that Roosevelt really exemplifies our ability to manage our capacity. So it really fills my heart with joy to be able to share what I call the keys to managing our capacity for success with you and the university as a whole today. Now, as Christy mentioned, I am the CEO of Flourishing LLC, which is my coaching and consulting business where I primarily help women. I know we have a couple of men here, but helping people to really take control of their lives by identifying their values, creating healthy boundaries, and being intentional about what they spend their time on. And I really do all of this by focusing on capacity. And I'll go ahead and share my definition of capacity with you in a bit, but I first wanted to give you the Cliff Notes version of how I really ended up in this space. As Christy mentioned, after spending over a decade in HR and working for billion-dollar companies across various industries, I started to notice that people were coming into my office to talk to me about everything except work-related things. And what they needed from me as an HR leader. And yes, there were questions around performance management and career development and, asking me how they could manage their time better. But I realized that what most people were needing help with was really managing their capacity to do it all. Because there seemed to be this blurred line of how do I do what I need to do at work and be successful and manage all of the stuff that I should, and I put in air quotes because there's a lot of things that we think we should do. But how am I able to do all of that and leave all of my stuff at the door because it's personal? And so the truth for me is that it's almost impossible to just leave it at the door, because even when we're working, in the back of our minds, or at least in the back of my mind anyway, there were thoughts swirling around my brain as it related to my finances, my health, my marriage, my children, my parents, just so many different things, to the point where it started to impact how I really was showing up at work. And what I've learned so far is that what we struggle with at work has more to do with what we have going on outside of work and in our personal lives than the actual job or career itself. So before I jump all the way in though and share what those 3 keys are, I do have to let you know that I do like interaction. So I will be asking you to type in the chat. So get your fingers ready, because first up, I really want to know what comes to mind for you when you hear the word capacity. You can either come off mute or type in the chat what comes up for you in terms of definition. Ability, okay. The time I have to complete assignments, I like that. I agree with those as well. Okay, now I asked that because I wanted to really give you the technical definition of capacity, and that is the maximum amount something can contain. So when I dug a little bit deeper, I really wanted to understand, how do we manage our personal capacity? But everything I found honestly had to do with like warehousing and workforce planning and things of that nature. So for me, in true Capricorn fashion, yes, I'm a Capricorn, I really kind of combined and came up with my own definition based on not only my understanding of the word, but also my experiences. So to me, capacity really is the amount of time and energy that we have available to wear all of the many hats that we rotate on and off all day long. It's more so about what you're filling your capacity up with and what you're giving out to your friends, family, careers, and whatnot based on that capacity. So it's this constant exchange. Now, I probably know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you anyway. How many of you here are constantly switching hats, juggling priorities, trying to be the best moms, parents, employees, business owners, entrepreneurs on the planet? If that's you, then put me in the chat. Me. Good. I'm so glad I'm in good company. I feel like I'm in a safe space. Good. And so I asked you to do that because I wanted to know how many of you really can relate to that feeling of being overwhelmed and exhausted and just downright burnt out from trying to manage all of those competing priorities between our personal and our professional lives. As it turns out, really doing all of these things, including dealing with our own relationships with our significant others, working our butts off at work And sometimes, if I'm honest, sometimes we're working with people that we may or may not like, and constantly having to shift priorities and make decisions all day long. It takes up our capacity. And the problem is that too many of us honestly are walking around at what I like to call max capacity. And we don't realize it until we end up with health, relationship, or even financial problems. And most of us are the high achieving, goal hitting, the ones checking all the boxes on the checklist that this happens to. Anybody else in here consider themselves a high achiever or a goal slayer? A checker boxer? Okay, good. Me too. Me too. And I said that too because a lot of us really look good on paper, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, Facebook, all of these different places. But what's happening is that many of us are secretly struggling with that overwhelm, that pure exhaustion, and that burnout. And this kind of behavior and pattern is not sustainable for long-term success. Now, because we get so accustomed to making things happen and constantly being on go mode, it becomes normal to us. And I've already asked if anyone considers themselves, the one who's doing it all, but does anybody else consider themselves the go-to in their friends or family groups, like the one that they call to solve problems, or the one that, knows just what to say when something bad happened at work? Anybody the go-to in here? Yes, being that go-to can be pretty darn exhausting. And I like to call us the reliable ones. And I do say we because it's important that you know that I too am a work in progress and I am far from perfect, but I'm also coming from a place of I've been there and I've done that. And I want to give you just a little bit more backstory because at a time when I made more money than I've ever made in my entire life and was really climbing the good old corporate ladder, I felt like what my mentor, Patrice Washington, calls a public success and a private failure. I had the nice house in the suburbs, the handsome husband who cooks, the cute kids, the good job, and I was absolutely fabulous on paper and social media and on LinkedIn and whatnot. But what nobody knew is that behind all of that, my marriage was in shambles. I was on the brink of divorce. I was spending all of that money that I was making as fast as it could come in. And it was due to my lack of fulfillment at work and because of the pain of the things that were really happening in my relationship. And then on top of that, as a parent, I was beyond exhausted because I was going to the hospital at least twice a week with my daughter, who had chronic migraine since she was about 2. And at the time, she was about 16. Now, because all of that stress, anxiety, and the overwhelm being so constant, again, I wrote this off as normal, didn't even know I was at max capacity until I was rushed to the ICU in January of 2019. And all of that normal was not so normal. It had literally taken a toll on my body. And now, while I'm glad that I'm here to tell the story today, I want you to understand that part of managing your capacity means getting honest with yourself. So I had to get very, very honest with myself about what was working, what was not working. And then within a matter of months, I had to make some very difficult and, to be very honest, uncomfortable decisions that resulted in me separating from my husband, becoming a single mom at 35, and really changing jobs. But what I realized throughout this is that it was capacity work. I was managing myself as a human resource, literally. And that's what I'm going to tell you how to do today. So first, I would like to share with you what I consider those keys for managing your capacity for success so that you, number one, don't end up in the hospital like me. And then number two, I want to share with you a couple of those telltale signs that you might be at max capacity in case you're wondering what to look for. Is that okay with you all? Head nods, thumbs up, yeses? Yeah, good. Okay, just want to make sure that you are still here. Good. Okay. So let's talk about these 3 keys. They are awareness, alignment, and action. And I'm going to go over each of these individually. So if you don't already, make sure you have a notebook or pen, paper, phone, something to take some good notes with, because these are nuggets that you really can, excuse me, apply to each and every area of your life. So let's talk about awareness, which is what I refer to as what's taking up your capacity. Now, how many of you have ever worked with, been friends with, or known somebody with like zero self-awareness? Like they dismiss social cues, they say whatever comes to their mind. If that's you, put yes in the chat. No judgment whatsoever. You might even be that friend. And I'm asking you that because is it not like the most frustrating situation ever? Like, especially at work. I don't know how many times in my corporate career I've said to myself and also to managers, I'm sorry, you need to practice self-awareness, because you're either going to get fired or you're probably going to get punched in the face outside of work because of the things that come out of your mouth. And now I'm not condoning violence in any way, shape, or form. I'm saying that, not everyone responds the same way when they're triggered. And sometimes that lack of self-awareness can bring certain things on. And so from that lens, I want you to shift that thinking to yourself, because honestly, think about this for a moment. If you are running around at max capacity and you have zero awareness, eventually you will likely be fired because you're unable to work, because you're unable to focus at work due to your mind being all over the place. And you will likely be punched in the gut by the world, because when you're at max capacity, life can get so uncomfortable and feel as though it's spinning out of control that you can feel like not only is the weight of the world on your shoulders, but it may also feel like you've been in the ring with Mike Tyson. So you have to really be aware, particularly of how you're showing up, not how you want to show up or how you think you're showing up in the various areas of your life, as a mom, as a husband, as a wife, as a dad, as a friend, or as an employee. And I use 5 different areas of flow to really help you get in tune and practice that self-awareness. But again, going back to what I said earlier, you really have to be honest with yourself or it won't work. And so I want to quickly give you those couple of areas. The first one is heart flow, and this is all about the relationships. You have people, values, boundaries, all of the things that pull on your heartstrings. And then the second one is your workflow, which is, as you guessed, all about your work, but really more so about your career fulfillment or lack thereof, and how that is impacting your capacity overall. And then the third one we have is your cash flow, which is all about your money and how you're managing it, how you're leaving a legacy if that's something that you choose to do. And then we have your health flow, which really focuses on your mental, emotional, and physical health and how all of them together work either for or against your overall capacity. And then last but not least is about your faith flow, which is really about, your belief in a higher power, higher purpose, whoever or whatever you consider source, and how that ties into your ability to manage your capacity in these different areas. And I know I may not have time to fully elaborate, but what I really want you to know is that when just one of these areas is off and out of flow, then your capacity is impacted. And they are literally all working together to help you show up in excellence so that you can do all the things that you want to do as an employee, as a parent, and really helping you to flow and flourish regardless of the room that you are in. So for me, as I mentioned earlier, this really looked like being honest about what was not working in my marriage and being courageous enough to make some changes. And I don't know anybody on the planet who willingly decides, yeah, I think I want to get divorced, or yeah, I think I want to be a single parent. But I said that because if something is not working and it's causing you more harm than good, then you have to be able to let it go. And so awareness is really about that exchange that I talked about earlier, understanding what's taking up your capacity and what you're giving out based on that. So I want to ask you something with that. When was the last time that any of you here checked in with yourself and said, hey, self, how do you feel? what do you want? What do you need? And I'm asking that seriously because most of the time we're too busy doing all of the things because we wear so many different hats that we don't take the time to become aware and tap into what we think, what we feel, or what we need. And so I want to remind you that something my dad used to tell me all the time is to be aware is to be alive. And so you have to start becoming aware of what's taking up your capacity and how it impacts how you show up across the board in order for you to really manage it. So that's the first key to capacity. Before I go on, are there any questions or anything that have popped up? Christy, I know you are managing the chat, but I feel like I'm talking fast and want to give everybody an opportunity to ask questions as they come up.
No questions yet, just comments. So yeah, feel free, if you do have questions, you can chat them in the chat box, and when opportunity presents itself, I'll share it with Nicole.
Okay, gave me a good coffee sip break. Okay, so let's get into this second one, which is alignment. Now, when I think of alignment, I see it as your heart, your mind, and your actions all really being on the same page. And then this is where those values come in, as well as boundaries. And I pause here because this is where you really have to think about, do your actions match your words? And if you say that you value spending time with, for instance, your family, right? But you're working 80 hours a week, is that really alignment? Also, if you're saying that you love and respect, you value love and respect, but are in relationships or friendships or working in organizations where you're treated like dirt or the environment is toxic, is that alignment? Most of us, I hope, are shaking our heads no. So for me, alignment is really knowing all about what you value and aligning your everyday life to that. Now, I mentioned earlier that as part of my work, on my own capacity work, I separated from my husband and changed jobs all at the same time. So there was a lot of change that was going on, but I bring it up because that was not only a result of me practicing the awareness of what I valued, it was simultaneously me aligning it to my everyday life. I was saying that I valued my time and my children, but I was commuting 2 hours one way a day. So about 4 hours a day, or part-time job, basically commuting to and from work to give them what I consider the financial things that I didn't have. But in the reality, they really didn't want that. They wanted me, my presence, my attention. And so I had to take the time to align what I was doing with what it was that I said that I valued. And so with that, here I come with another question. I want to know if you value the exact same things that you valued 5 years ago. Yes, no, maybe. And I'm not talking about core values like love, respect, trust, honesty. Great. Okay. I'm seeing everybody say no, that it's changed. I see some yeses. Okay, some. That's fair. No right or wrong answers. No judgment either. Okay, good. And I would say, what about 10 years ago? Do you value those same things? And I'm really asking you this because as you are identifying your values and aligning them, I need you to give yourself permission to change those values over time. I found both personally and professionally that what I valued 10 years ago is very different from what I value today. And I had to give myself permission to change the attachment to those values. So for example, about 10 years ago, I probably valued hanging out with my friends a lot more and climbing the corporate ladder. And today, that's not what I value. I do value my friends, but I simultaneously value my family time, the work that I do as a capacity coach, and my me time. And so if you think about your values and they have changed over the course of the last 1, 2, 5, 10 years, have you given yourself permission to align them to who you are today? And really not who you were yesterday or 5 years ago. And I say that because I remember when I started this journey into entrepreneurship and coming from human resources, I had really well-meaning friends and family that really thought I was bonkers for stepping away from my cushy HR job. And a lot of, what kept me there, not only was the consistent paycheck, I'll be honest, but also was the value that had been etched in my mind, my body, and my heart, that you get a good job that has really good benefits, you climb the corporate ladder, you retire, you do those things in that order. So deciding to stray from that, I realized I had to give myself permission to shift what I valued. And part of that shifting value was understanding the level of fulfillment that I had in the work that I was doing, and also understanding the amount of impact that I wanted to have. I wanted to impact people outside of just, the corporate walls that I was working in. So what I just encourage you to do with your values when it comes to alignment is to make sure that you understand what it is that you value, and it's truly your value and not one that was handed down to you. And so I want to go to this last key of managing your capacity. And this one is all about action. And now I know I've talked about this a little bit in both of the other keys, but what it really boils down to is this: you have to be able to walk the talk. And I'll say it again, you have to walk the talk. If you want to have work-life balance and fulfilling relationships, and really to be able to live, the life according to your standards, your values, what are you going to do in order to do that? And sometimes that means that we have to make some uncomfortable changes. We have to shift our actions. And so you need to think about, what actions do you need to take to make it happen? And one of the things that I say frequently in my podcast is that it really is half the battle once you know something, now what? So what are you going to do with it? Knowing is only going to get you halfway there. And your actions have to speak louder than your words. And they need to be aligned to match what you're filling your capacity up with. And two actions that I am always recommending, and two things that you could practice today, are delegation and boundaries. Anybody here excited to delegate? No, probably not. Yes, no, yes. Okay, love it. Anybody here think that they're good at delegating? I know, I believe I'm good at delegating. Ish. Okay, got it. Doesn't apply. No, good. I say that because there's a stat that says about, I think it's 75 or 85% of us believe that we are really good at delegating, but we're not. And sometimes that fear of delegating can stop us from doing that. Also, one thing that I call the perfect Paddy syndrome of, wanting things done my way, the best way, has prevented me from doing that. But when we think about managing our capacity for success, delegation and boundaries have to be part of that. And as I mentioned, I'm a recovering control freak and perfectionist. And so I know that, some of you may not like what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. And that is that you cannot do every single thing at 100% and still be successful in the long run. I'm going to say it one more time. You can't do everything at 100% and be successful in the long term, because that's what leads to that burnout and running around at max capacity because you've been trying to do it all. And I want us to be honest here too for a moment, because a lot of what we're doing, if we're trying to run around and do everything at 100%, everything is not at a grade A. There are probably some B's, some C's, some D's, and some of those different areas. And again, I speak for myself as well. But delegation really is the tool that's helped me tremendously in both my personal and my professional life. And again, it's something that you can start today. And so I want to talk a little bit more about delegation, just to give you some quick tips if you struggle with it. Because number one, you have to be clear about what it is that you need. And this is where that awareness from the very first key of managing your capacity comes in. Being aware and taking the time to ask yourself, what do I need? Why do I need it? Really assessing that piece is going to help you to be clear about delegating. The second part is really understanding who can help you. So you have to be able to select someone who you believe will be able to help you get whatever it is that you need to get done. Again, this is in your personal life and your professional life. For me, this has looked like delegating to my husband, delegating certain things to my daughter, who is 18. So, she's grown, so I can delegate more things to her now. But really, I've had to stop and pause and understand what I need them to help me with. And so I want you to make sure that you do that. The third part with delegation is that you have to let people do what it is that you're asking them to do. And I say all the time, over and over, that you can't tell somebody what to do and how to do it, because that's just going to cause friction. You have to be able to allow them to ask questions. And if you're giving clear direction, that's why most of us think we're good at delegating, but we're not. Giving them the ability to figure out how to do it and having the ability to come back and ask you questions. And so I'll leave that with you with delegation. So again, that's something you can practice today. But the other part that I wanted to talk about is boundaries. I want to ask this: does anyone feel like they struggle with creating boundaries, or maybe not even creating them? Because I used to be really good at creating them, but not so much enforcing them like they were in here. Anybody have struggle in any of those? Okay. Don't worry, you're not alone, Jennifer. I'm terrible too. I'm getting better. I won't claim that I'm terrible. I'm much better than I used to be at that. And so I wanted to know about that because I read something a while ago that said that the only people who get upset about you having boundaries are the ones who benefit from you having none. And that really kind of punched me in the gut, because when I thought about times where I had really lax boundaries or I was afraid to put boundaries in place, many of the people, both personally and professionally, that were bothered by those boundaries were ones who really benefited from me being at max capacity, working really, really long hours, or extending myself on the weekend to extended friends and family to do things. And the moment that I put those boundaries in, it was like I was the bad person. And so I want to remind you just that, I did an entire podcast on checking your boundaries. So if you want to go check that out, you can. But when you're saying that you're overwhelmed, or you don't have time, you don't have energy, you're at max capacity, it's highly likely that there is some sort of a boundary issue. And again, as an overachiever, I constantly was saying yes to everything and everybody, because I can be honest, I wanted to feel needed and I was afraid to hurt other people's feelings. But at the end of the day, not having any boundaries and not knowing where to draw the line literally almost cost me my life, because of that stress, the lack of sleep, the anxiety, all of those things that were going into it. So I just want to tell you again, you need boundaries, and that is an action that you can take today. And so as we talked about those three keys, I'll, go back over them. That is making sure that you have awareness around what is, going on, what you're filling your capacity up with, the company that you keep, what you're feeling in your heart, the things that are swirling around in your mind. In order to have the capacity for long-term success, you have to take inventory. So that's where the awareness is. That second key was around alignment. And so aligning your everyday actions, your thoughts, the way that you talk, the way that you spend your time to what it is that you say that you value, and making sure that the third part, action, that third key, is following through, that you're taking actions, whether that's delegating or setting boundaries, saying no, getting comfortable, getting uncomfortable. That's going to help you to manage your capacity for long-term success, both personally and professionally. And I know we have a little bit of time, so I do want to give you a couple of kind of those telltale signs that I mentioned at the beginning around how to determine if you are actually at max capacity. And so the very first one that comes up for me is being overwhelmed by everything. And I do mean everything. I say this with a smile because I remember coming home one day after, going through performance evaluations and doing some layoffs, just all kinds of things were going on at work. And I found one dish in the sink. Yes, one dish. And I kind of lost my cookies, and my kids were looking at me like I had two heads. My husband is like, hey, what is going on? There's one dish. Like, why are you going off over one dish? And it was because everything overwhelmed me. I had so much that was swirling around in my brain that even the smallest things kind of sent me over the rail. So if you're experiencing that overwhelm for every single thing, then you may be at max capacity. And I will say this, the caveat is that I know it's, pretty easy to get overwhelmed by everything, especially right now with, being back in person at work in some places, back in person at school, like things kind of being normal again. And then numbers of, COVID shooting up. There's so much to be overwhelmed by. But if outside of that, every single thing just, makes you fly over the handle, then chances are you're dealing with some capacity issues. Number two is your inability to focus. And what this looked like for me is, again, being super organized, being the go-to person, being able to achieve all kinds of things. I would, the night before I left work, I'd write out the things that I needed to do so that I was organized in the morning. And then when I'd come in, I'd give myself time to kind of go through and figure out if there were fires that I needed to put out. But I started to notice that no matter how many times I wrote out that to-do list, nothing was getting done. I was constantly thinking about, as I mentioned earlier, stuff that was going on in my relationship, or, things that were going on with one of my parents that I was caring for, or, hospital bills that were racking up because of, my daughter having the migraines. There were so many things that were going across my brain that I could not focus. And that started to show up, in my performance at work. And so again, if you're finding that no matter what you do, no matter how many times you write out that to-do list, no matter, how many times you try to get your brain back focused, you just can't focus, you probably have something going on with your capacity, because there's a ton of things that are swirling around in your brain. And last but not least, it's the always tired sign. So I smile at this one too, because I can remember, drinking all the water, eating healthy, exercising, getting the recommended 7 to 8 hours of sleep. But I was still tired, like this draining tired that I just could not shake. And oftentimes that too is a result not only of, all the things that are swirling around in your brain, but also our body's inability to really rest. There's a really big difference between rest and sleep. And so if you are not resting and allowing your body to, rejuvenate, and you can't because there's so much that's happening, chances are there are some things that are going on with capacity. And I know that all of these signs seem maybe really simple on the surface, and it's pretty easy to just bypass them and count them as normal. But these are some of the things that I noticed and I completely dismissed before I ended up in ICU. And so I caution you to take the time to be aware of what it is, again, that you're feeling, how you're showing up, really how you're showing up, now how you think you're showing up, and how your energy is. If you're taking vitamins and you're sleeping and you're exercising, but you still have this level of fatigue that's unexplainable, you should probably check your capacity. And so with that, I definitely want to just make sure that you guys know that being an overachiever, you probably don't want to ask for help, and you don't have to ask for help. I'm offering. So if you need help figuring out how to manage your capacity and creating, balance between your personal and your professional life, you have a whole capacity coach here in your back pocket. I know Christy has dropped the link to the Flow and Flourish podcast, which is amazing. We're on season 2, so feel free to check that out. But then I also have a free tool for everyone to use called a capacity calculator. And Christy, I don't know if I shared that link with you.
I just dropped it in the chat.
Oh, perfect. Okay. It's a capacity calculator. Again, it's free. It really just forces you to be honest with yourself. So if you're not honest and you're not ready to be honest with yourself about what's going on with you, then it wouldn't be beneficial to you. But if you're ready to manage your capacity and kind of figure out, what's working, what's not working, this is a great resource. And based on how you answer the questions, you'll even get some suggestions based on your level of capacity. So I want to encourage you to do that and know that you're not alone, because you helped me realize today I'm not alone in managing my capacity and being an overachiever. And I hope that you'll be able to implement these things, at least with the delegation and the boundaries, if nothing else, to help you for sustainable success. Remember, we're in this for the long haul.
Thank you so much, Nicole. And are we ready to have some time for Q&A? If there are any questions, we have some time for that. Yeah. One question that I had, Nicole, you said rest, right? And I just actually listened to Glennon Doyle was a part of her podcast, and she said, oh, my friend Liz Gilbert, the author of Eat, Pray, Love, she said, Glennon, what if the new revolution isn't, the strong woman, the brave woman? What if the revolution is the restful woman? And I've been chewing on that over the last couple of days, and this made me think of it, and that so many women are probably, and men too, right? In this world, in these times, are operating at max capacity, not realizing it. And maybe in some of those multiple flow areas, they feel over capacity. So if you're feeling this way, if you do the calculator and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm certainly at capacity, what is the first step? Where do we start? What do we prioritize?
So for me, I'm a writer. I have to write stuff out, and I write out what my priorities are based on, I don't want to call them roles, but I guess roles. So honestly, every single Saturday, sometimes Sunday, I write out what are the things that I need to do for me. I start putting me at the top of the list, because when I started this activity, I would write out, what do I need to do as a wife, as a mom, as a business owner, as an employee, all of these different things. So if you take that capacity calculator and you see that you're at moderate capacity or max capacity, the first thing I would do is write out, what do you really value? Do you value your health? Do you value your time? Do you value your peace of mind? And allowing your actions and the things that you spend your time on during the week to be reflected based on what it is that you say that you value. It's honestly taking that time to assess, what is it that I'm saying I value versus what I'm spending my time on. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Nicole?
Well, I don't have any questions. I just want to say that this has been an amazing presentation. However, Nicole, I think you are doing yourself a disservice by highlighting this toward women. I really think that the essence of what you have presented today would be beneficial to all people in whatever capacity, whether it's corporate America, whether it's their homes, their churches, or whatever. Primarily their homes, because the home is the place where society comes from. So even as I have listened to you today, and I'm noticing, in fact, you mentioned the destruction of the family. If the family could determine their capacity, then everything else from the city, the state, the nation, the world would be better off. So this is powerful. I am the president CEO of a computer engineering firm. And I think that you probably was born after I graduated from Roosevelt, which was 1977. But out of the mouth of babes, I mean, this has been really great. But I admonish you to discontinue restricting this knowledge, which is common sense, but do not restrict it just to women. When you present yourself to the world, you're presenting yourself to all people that can benefit from your wisdom, that you've gained from the short time that you've lived on this earth. So that's all I have to say. I have no questions. I am so proud of you, being so young and so wise. And I hope that, if you have a book or something like that, we get that information out there, and that there are just so many people that can benefit from what you've said today. So thank you.
I'm so humbled. I'm so honored. Thank you so very, very much. And I received your feedback completely. I started out thinking that I needed to just focus on women, but the more that I've done this, I have continuously been told it's not just women who need your help, Nicole. It's all of us. We're all trying to manage our capacity. And funny you should say book. I'm working on a book that will be out in the beginning of the year. And it just really goes even deeper into managing our personal capacity for success.
Yes.
And so, Christy, I'm going to let you know about that. It's in the editing phase. It's all of that stuff.
So excited.
So again, Dan, thank you so much for your feedback, and I really, really appreciate it.
I was going to say, before you shared that you're in the kind of the final stages of editing your book, that you're going to have to find capacity to write one, because we have some fans here that are waiting for it.
Oh, that makes me so excited. My one of my coaches, because coaches have coaches too, right? Like, you have to have other people around you to pour into you, like I mentioned. She's been on me for the last year and saying, you need to get this book out. You need to get this book. And I'm like, all right, I guess I'll manage my capacity to do it. And so it's been a labor of love, but I know that it's going to continue to change the world. So thank you for everyone who was ready to receive it. I can't wait.
Well, thank you again so much, Nicole. As I think Julia mentioned here, you have 16 people here who are ready to read it. 16 people here who are, felt like, if you're like me, feel like this last hour has been very powerful and helpful. And we thank you for just taking the time to share with us all of your wisdom and advice. And to everyone, all of our guests here, thank you so much for joining us today. This session is recorded, so it'll be posted. I'll be emailing it out to everyone who is registered. And I'll also share in there the links on how to connect with Nicole, in addition to her podcast. If you like podcasts, this has to be on your list. She has so much great information and insights that she shares, like today. And of course, that capacity calculator was really healthy. I started it and I need to finish it. So Nicole, we appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here with us this afternoon.
It's been my honor and absolute pleasure. I love to continue to partner with Roosevelt. Roosevelt is, again, part of the reason that allowed me to be able to flow and flourish, because that traditional route through Loyola was not going to cut it for me at that time. And so I'm grateful to be here and to help. So thank you for having me.
Well, thank you. And I'm expecting a partnership has something to do with your book in the near future at some point. So everyone stay tuned. And thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.